We begin with an examination of a fundamental human paradox. This is an inquiry titled The Burden of Sight: Why Clarity Feels Threatening.
Now, clarity is usually framed as something we all want. Individuals, organizations, they all say they need it in their lives, in their systems, in their plans for the future. But if you watch closely, you see a paradox. When that genuine clarity actually arrives, the reaction is almost never relief. What's far more common is hesitation, discomfort, or even outright rejection.
So you have this fundamental conflict, a disconnect between the stated goal and the observed behavior. In principle, we seek clarity. In practice, we resist it. Now, if clarity were an intrinsically desirable thing, that kind of resistance would be, well, an anomaly. The fact that it happens so often suggests something else. It suggests that clarity itself is often perceived as a threat.
To understand this, our examination will move through 5 sections. First, the clarity paradox. Then, the function of ambiguity. After that, the threats of knowing, followed by mechanisms of avoidance, and we'll conclude with the responsibility of sight.
So let's start with section 1, the clarity paradox. The core idea here is really rooted in a simple observation. If clarity were something we naturally and universally wanted, we would almost never push back against it. The fact that we do, that's what we need to look at first. You see, how we receive an idea really depends on what it does for us. Ideas that make complex things seem simple, we welcome those. They reduce the mental effort. But ideas that reveal uncomfortable truths, those are resisted. So clarity isn't just about understanding something, it's about removing ambiguity. And it's that removal, that's what feels like a threat. Because when ambiguity is gone, responsibility is a lot harder to avoid.
Which brings us to section 2, the function of ambiguity. We're going to define clarity here not just as seeing things clearly, but as the removal of a protective layer of uncertainty.
Think of ambiguity as a state that allows for multiple ways to interpret the same thing. Because of that, it works as a kind of psychological insulation. It creates a buffer, a space between an individual and a reality that might be too harsh to face directly.
Ambiguity has these protective qualities. For one, it softens difficult truths. By keeping things uncertain, it allows us to put off making decisions, and that in turn protects our emotional stability. See, clarity takes away that option to just wait. Once a situation becomes obvious, the very act of not doing something becomes visible, and that visibility just ramps up the psychological pressure.
Let's move to section 3, the threats of knowing. The real danger of clarity, if you want to call it that, is its power to collapse all the possible interpretations down into one single concentrated and unavoidable reality. First, clarity is a threat to our identity. The beliefs we have about ourselves, our relationships, our place in the world, they all depend on these stable, personal stories we tell. Clarity can come in and expose all the inconsistencies in those stories, and when that narrative stability gets shaken, our very identity feels uncertain. The mind is really built to defend identity, so anything that threatens it, including clarity, is seen as an enemy.
Second, clarity is a threat to our social alignment. You know, what holds a group together are shared beliefs, shared assumptions. When one person sees something clearly, and that clear view contradicts what the group believes, tension is created. That tension threatens the individual sense of belonging, which is, of course, a primary human need. So to protect that social stability, many of us will instinctively water down or obscure any clarity we find.
And third, clarity threatens our perceived sense of control. When you get a really clear picture of a complex system, you often see the limits of your own personal agency. You realize just how many external forces are shaping outcomes. That can dismantle the illusion that you're in complete control. And that loss of perceived control, well, it creates anxiety. Ambiguity, on the other hand, lets you hold on to a sense of hope, whereas clarity often replaces that hope with cold, hard realism.
Okay, section 4, mechanisms of avoidance. Our minds are not passive here. They actively work to defend their own stability against any truths they see as disruptive.
The main way this happens is through cognitive dissonance. This process kicks in whenever a new reality conflicts with a belief we hold very deeply. To fix that conflict, you have 2 choices: change your belief or reject the evidence. Now, changing a core belief can feel like it's destabilizing your entire identity. Rejecting the new evidence? Well, that keeps everything just as it was. The brain, more often than not, chooses the path of self-preservation.
There are other strategies, of course. In today's information-heavy world, our brains adapt by aggressively filtering what we let in, just to avoid being overloaded. This naturally leads to a preference for simple stories, simple narratives. A more subtle tactic is to sort of linger near a state of understanding without ever fully committing to it. The mind senses the implications. It knows that full clarity will force a change. So delay becomes a coping strategy in itself. And that leads us to our final section, number 5, the responsibility of sight. The simple act of understanding something, it's almost never a neutral process. It comes with consequences. You see, clarity creates what we can call a decision demand. When your choices and their consequences become crystal clear, doing nothing is no longer passive. It becomes an active, conscious choice. Your brain recognizes this as commitment pressure. And commitment means eliminating other possibilities, which can feel like a kind of loss. The more clarity you have, the more unavoidable those decisions become. There's also a real psychological burden that comes with seeing a system clearly. It means you recognize the underlying power structures. You see the incentive systems for what they are, the hidden trade-offs. And once you see those dynamics, it's very hard to unsee them. To ignore them takes a conscious, continuous effort. And because of that, many people just prefer a state of partial awareness.
On top of that, some realizations are simply irreversible. Once you understand certain things, that perspective permanently changes how you interpret everything that happens next. This permanence is what makes clarity so intimidating. Ambiguity always leaves you a path of retreat, a way to go back to how things were when you didn't know. Clarity, it closes those paths.
So to sum it all up, clarity isn't rejected because we dislike truth as an abstract idea. It's resisted because a clear, functional truth changes the fundamental conditions of everything: our decisions, our identity, our responsibilities. The act of understanding is not a neutral download of information. It actually alters the very structure of choice itself.
Which leaves us with a final question. If clarity increases responsibility and reduces our psychological insulation, what conditions would have to exist to make people actively seek it instead of avoiding it?